them down.
Yeah.
Those exercises will balance them to be able to sit down and do the bookwork.
Yeah, they're just kind of routine
either way they
predictable
work.
exercises.
Yeah, because you don't want to be too high or too low.
Right,
then
there's
that
control.
Right.
Yeah.
You're not in that optimum level where learning can then happen. So those types of strategies,
Yeah, exactly. There's, you know, a lot of people think that kind of excitability and emotions and anxiety are just bad, but there's actually, you know, a healthy amount of it. It's kind of like a bell curve. If, you know, not enough is not good, but too much is not good either. So, really, it's that kind of middle amount that's optimal for learning and, you know, being cognitively engaged.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we can lastly just have some resources, and we should have put Smart Moves on there because
We don't have it there.
No, I forgot.
That's
that.
right.
But
This one
these
is
are
great too. She
definitely-
did it after. It's the same author.
Yeah.
I can pass this around too if anyone's interested. It's a really helpful, it's a great book called Just Take a Bite. It's listed on here as well. And it is, what's the title? Easy, Effective Answers to Food Aversions and Eating Challenges. So it goes through all different scenarios, different types of eaters, and gives suggestions, very tangible suggestions for how you can work with this. Just briefly, like you're basically starting off, there are different stages, and you would start off at the stage of acceptance and move to touch. Then you would be moving to smell, taste, and then eventually to adding a new food in, and following this sort of these stages, these levels of how to introduce new foods, or just anything that the child might have an aversion to or doesn't want to try. I'll pass it around, and you can take a look. It's a great resource. Sorry.
We brought these toys that we thought they're fun, but they're also really useful. So, for example, to work on dressing, or this is a fun way to involve like just a toy, it's a stuffed animal. So it has zippers and buttons. So definitely there's still fine motor skills in all of this.
Gotta get dressed in the morning.
Yeah. And then maybe part of the morning routine is, okay, when I get dressed, then I can dress up for food. So it's like also that idea. There's Velcro, so it just makes it very fun. Maybe to learn tying shoes, they learn how to tie the stuffed animals' shoes first. So
Yeah. And this is similar, just in a different format for an older child. Same idea. There's zippers, shoelace tying, buckles. You know, very similar to that. Just in a different.
So then you set it up here.
And it's
yeah, and there are different ones of these visual timers. Some of them have different colors, so that's another option too.
I know.
I need that for me.
Oh, for you.
Yeah.
What color would you like? We can pass this also around so people can see what we were talking about, and if you want to add anything.
I had, my printer wasn't working, but I had jotted down a few quotes that I thought were really good from Smart Moves. That we
Oh,
could
okay.
use.
So we can do that before we go around for questions, right?
Sure.
To add.
Well, there's one quote that was in the book that was by Theodore Roosevelt. So there's this quote in the Smart Moves book that I just thought was really cool. It just makes so much sense. Every child has inside him an aching void for excitement, and if we don't fill it with something which is exciting and interesting and good for him, he will fill it with something which is exciting and interesting and which isn't good for him. So I feel like occupational therapy, is just, and those types of strategies are just really good ways to help engage a child to do, their productive work, their productive occupation, so to speak, and as opposed to, if you don't give the child those tools, then they are gonna sometimes fill it with things that are kind of less productive or just counterproductive.
Anything else? The Out of Sync Child is another book that talks about sensory processing disorder. It's It's like Barnes and Noble.
I've heard of it.
Yeah.
Yes, can you hold it?
Yeah, so we'll email them because I don't think we have enough for everybody, but
Yeah, if you wanna look at them, I'll just leave them up there. If you wanna see. But there's establishing morning routines, establishing toileting routines, bath time routines, bedtime, mealtime. So a lot of transitioning and learning through play. So we'll leave them out there, but we can email them so you have them. Yeah.
thank you.
How much of those charts do you think is too much, too little? To incorporate on your daily life.
It depends on Oliver.
Okay.
So, I don't know, I mean, try it and then maybe just start with just one. Try maybe at a specific time that you think he might need it and then see if it works
Right.
and if he likes it.
Okay.
It's a lot of trial and error, because that's what we would be doing as a therapist. It's a lot trying to figure out what strategy works and what doesn't. So you're trying things out, trying to carry it over at home, seeing how that works out, and if that's not working, then you move on to a different strategy.
Right.
Yeah.
It's very personalized.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it makes it hard to give like a one size fits all, you know, because it's so client centered that
Right.
it's very individualized.
Yeah.
Which for us as students, we're like, how do you do
Yeah.
it? And our teachers are always like, it's client dependent.
It depends.
It really depends.
When we did the last positive discipline workshop, we showed that there were I think like 50 tools that you can use. We didn't talk about all of them, but it's really knowing what to do or knowing learning some tools, and then you choose the one that is good for you. Like Tony said, for the girls, the timer is not good, so
Right.
you just think
Yeah,
about
just kind of like
something
knowing their
else.
personality and
Mhm.
knowing, just having a big toolbox, I guess, of things you can pull out at.
Yeah.
Should we go around and then maybe you have more comments about the smart moves, or and then
Sure.
if you have any questions or comments.
It's kind of a question, comment, and it's a comment about the smart moves. I think a lot of parents have noticed that their kids' behavior after, say, they've watched a TV show or something like that, and I know a lot of people notice that their kids are more irritable after that and just have trouble then kind of transitioning back into reality. And in the Smart Moves book, they kind of,
Oh, I'm glad you're talking about TV.
what's that?
Good that you brought a quote about TV. I'm glad, Tony.
Yeah, so it kind of, and I read a bunch of different things about this, but so their theory on it is that when children watch TV, they elicit the survival response. Their body feels fear, so these children in this irritable state cling to the parents, which is their natural source of safety, and fight with siblings for that parental attention and security. And when it is not addressed, they remain in the state of hypervigilance or hyperactivity, irritability, and fear, and then cling to an adult that provides safety. So that's just kind of an interesting way of looking at it. I guess I'm kind of wondering what other people have noticed, or maybe even what the OTs kind of, if there are any like strategies with transitioning a child off of media back into reality. I don't know. Do you have any?
I think that's where a movement break might
Yeah.
actually
Yes, no.
readjust to get them back. Okay, we had this, but let's get that energy out and then transition to that next. I think a movement break might be beneficial in those situations.
Yeah, and I think something I read, talked about how with TV or a show, any sort of media, the child's mind is really kind of they're overstimulated. So a movement break I think would achieve the same type of response, or maybe there's endorphins or adrenaline kind of released with that. It would probably achieve the same type of response, but in maybe a healthier manner.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I mean, it based on like the child's response that they're having to the to the device or whatever it is, TV or whatever's happening, there are like different ways you could take that. Like if it is making it, like you're saying, it's overstimulating them and arousing them like too much, then incorporating certain sensory strategies to bring them down, to regulate them again could be really helpful. So that's where, I mean, proprioception is always great. Sometimes even vestibular, like, can be like swinging, doing like on a swing, going back and forth can help to regulate the system.
Rocking chair.
But a rocking chair, but that also would depend on knowing your child's sensory preferences, because if that certain sensation arouses them more, then that's not going to help. But with any type of like overstimulation, combining the regulatory sensory input, and as well as, I think, like any type of mindfulness or anything fits so perfectly in there. Transitioning out of like what was just going on to like how do we recenter and bring ourselves down and help to like regulate ourselves. Because I find just in general nowadays, not just with children, I think we are like living in a time where people don't know how to like regulate themselves anymore. You know, they just get so overstimulated by things because we're so overexposed to technology that we don't know how to self-regulate, and that's something that I think is really important to be able to teach children. And even something like, let's go outside, like let's get out. We were just in this technological bubble. Let's go outside right now and let's like get in touch with the ground and ground ourselves and be, you know, in nature. And
I didn't give her the speech. But you know, Tony actually does workshops on mindfulness. So you're talking to Tony about mindfulness, and that's, we've been doing them too. But thank you for adding them to this conversation, because it's great how we can integrate everything. What about not exposing the children to the screen time? That's the first step.
So it's like the preventative approach.
Exactly, right. So that is that tends to be our approach, but then every once in a while, Mommy, it's not fair.
Everybody else
okay, you get a half hour. Right, exactly.
No judgment.
And certain shows there's such a difference. Sorry, I don't mean to be there's like certain shows are like some are you know, the slow-paced, more kind of reality ones are definitely preferable. Some of them are just crazy fast-paced.
Super fast, and then they don't have the attention for the things that are real, not virtual. But also there is a danger with the kids watching TV or doing video games or anything, which is that they're very passive. And they are not playing, which is what they have to do actually. That's their occupation, as you said. I'm going to use that word now very much.
And I feel like if that's chronic, if they're constantly on media, then it's almost like they forget how to play. Like they need to be like reintroduced to it.
We don't know the consequences of the generations that are being raised, you know, with video games and all that. I don't think they're going to be very positive.
I know a 3-year-old who thinks Mario and Luigi are real and keeps asking, can Luigi come over for a play date?
Well, at least he wants to have him to play. He wants to like,
but it points out like
they get confused. The reality will be virtual.
Forget what they don't know until they see something like that.
Well, many times I wonder, all these, you know, shooters, not to talk about that, you know, in particular, but maybe they're confused because sometimes they are very strong video game players, and so you know then the reality is
huge.
It's all one thing, right? The virtual life and the reality. So there is research going on, but we don't see the results yet, other than in real life actually. But I think there is a connection there with bullying and with all the things that are going on.
Well, and then I think kids can learn to be dependent on it to suit themselves, because I know, and you know, parents have a lot going on too. They're tired, and I think sometimes they might offer media in order to calm their children down, which is like, you know, the opposite of what.
It's the opposite,
and then they're gonna grow up with like, oh my god, okay, then I need to like look at my phone.
Exactly. Oh, it's like a coping mechanism.
So you can see how even adults.
Totally. I mean, I do it
you just
sometimes.
and I found, I don't know where I read it, but when a child is having a temper tantrum, the worst thing you could do is to get on your phone, which
oftentimes, you know, we talk about in the positive discipline, not removing yourself, but saying, I need a breath, I need a moment.
Right.
But then if you take that moment and you look on your phone, there's actually statistics of that behavior not only increasing but getting worse, because as you check out, they're just hitting the roof. And so although you want to kind of get a breath and not get angry at your child, you're actually sort of making it worse by having that reaction in the moment.
Well, they think
Because
that
you're
the phone is more
You're
important than
disengaging,
death.
Right.
That's what they think, you know.
Yeah,
It's just,
so
I think that's
It's just,
wrong.
yeah,
just
avoid
to
it.
add to that, you're kind of taking a step back and entering, you know.
Yeah.
I always think of moments when I want to pull my phone out if I'm waiting for a train.
Yeah.
Instead of doing that, I've noticed that my eyes have been hurting a lot more if I look at my phone, so that's enough of a reason to not look at it. So I'm like, okay, what can I do instead? And then you just start to, what am I hearing right now? What am I looking at right now? What does it feel like right now in this moment? You know, so maybe those are types of things that you can work with your child as well, to refocus them, to focus on something that's more of, you're tapping into your senses and you're having them think in a different way, not just passively watching something.
That's exactly what we talked about at the mindfulness, like everything you just said. Because I was saying, like, what do you do? You're in line at the grocery store, and it's like there's a line ahead of you, and you're like, okay, I don't know what to do. So, you know, sometimes the first thing we do is pull out our phones, and instead of doing that, like you said, you really have to train yourself not to do that, because your brain is so geared towards, you know, that kind of that neural pathway, because you're doing it the same every time. Then to put a stop to that and do something else, like focus on your senses, is I think really
just
beneficial.
observe.
Yeah.
Observe what's going on around you.
Yeah.
So do you have questions, Taylor? I want to say Taylor Webb used to teach in the school, then she had beautiful babies, and now she's coming back to work full time. She's been Sabina, now she's coming work full time in September.
No, a lot of the things make sense. Even just the book, Give It a Try, I think it was. But I learned that here before I had kids, as a teacher, with carrots, and I swear my kids eat more carrots now than anybody else.
They're like, we have carrots every day.
At one point I thought I was gonna call the carrots a school.
Yeah, but it worked. Just give it a try. And as a teacher, I would see kids who, and I remember Laura saying, just all you have to do is lick the carrot. That counts. And I'm thinking, I don't know about this. But then you see it and it works. And by the end, that kid was eating carrots. You know what I mean? And it was a control thing. It was a sensory thing. It's a whole big picture.
Fear of the unknown.
Yeah, or what's going to happen. You know, will I get the next food item? You know, all these things are playing out, but the kind and firm and consistency, routine, all of these are just puzzle pieces for the child's. Yeah, and now my kids eat their raw. I can't even cook a vegetable, and they just eat raw vegetables first, and then they get their food, and that's just how. Literally, she's in her 6, and that's how it is. So other than the carrots, so all the other stuff, you know, it really rings true, and a lot of these things are useful. I'm a little nervous about, I think we have a good routine, and like even my youngest who just turned 3, if she doesn't get a bath, and I mean I think like most people, unless I'd like to think they need a bath every day, but sometimes it's like the hair
like once a week.
We're
Sorry, people. Sorry, teachers.
We're also on the ones.
If she doesn't
Your
get
skin gets so dry.
it does.
Honestly.
And if she doesn't get like even if it's just a little bath,
The idea of the bath.
she's like, "Where's my bath? Where's my bath?" She wants the bath.
She wants the routine.
I have heard that. Like,
She wants, and if it's not, because that's the calming down. That's the
routine.
You brush the teeth. She slams the thing. Then she goes around, gets the bath, comes out. You know,
it all makes sense to her.
It
Like,
does, and if you skip it, like. Now, part of it might be it's like delaying bedtime, but I don't think she's there yet. I think she actually just likes the routine. But it makes sense. I am nervous about summer and scheduling, because I know here we have this big break, and you know, there's certain things that will remain the same, but then, you know, I just think so many things benefit. You just get up, you do your normal routine, and then you start the day. I would love that to continue in the summer, even though they're not going to school. Not, you know, they wake up on their own, but I'm just, it kind of like gives a little.
You still can. You can still have them like still lay out their clothes. I always find even
Yes.
In the
Our,
summer?
in the summer, we don't lay out clothes, but my kids are a little older now. I mean, I think your older one's a little older, right? How old?
3 and almost 5.5.
So, I mean, mine don't lay them out in the summer. Like, they'll get dressed in the summer now, it's fine. But in the summer, I think it still is, like, nice to go in that routine and get dressed. Because then it makes them, once they're dressed, they're like, oh, let's go out and play, you know?
Yes, that's what I worry, like, they're just kind of lagging around.
Some parents set up the same routine in the summer, or at least partially, right? For during the week. Like, for example, Mondays we do painting here, on Tuesdays is Spanish in the morning, right? On Wednesdays natural sciences, on Thursdays language arts, and on Fridays math. And some parents do it, even if it's for a short period of time, you know, in the morning. And that consistency, right, Laura?
You do math.
Sometimes.
Or when he was, maybe when he was younger.
Leo is younger now. He
He
doesn't
was younger
right
too.
now.
He's 9. Do you have any questions? Oh, right now? Yes, I'm not sure. I was just going around. I'm sorry, I'm used to it, and we do go around in the school with the kids. We ask them if they have a question or a comment, and when they present their special classes, it's so funny because they do exactly the same thing,
Yeah.
right? And so I'm sorry. We can go around, or we can just jump. Whatever you want to do.
I don't think I guess it was more like, well, so then where do you start if you're interested in pursuing OT or looking into, like, where do you launch into it?
Yeah, we didn't
You
wanna,
said New Jersey
right,
is an easy state for it,
right,
because
it's
you don't
direct
need.
access. Yeah, we didn't wanna come in and say, go get OT.
Right, right.
But if you are interested, I mean, New Jersey has a lot of OT, luckily, a lot of clinics, a lot of private clinics, some connected to a hospital sometimes, so I think the first step is just searching kind of what works for you, where you live, and then contacting them and then seeing what their process is. Yeah.
Could I add something to that too?
Yeah.
You said you don't need a prescription, which is true. However, if you do get a prescription, then your insurance might cover it.
Right.
That's
That's
right.
right.
In conjunction with, if you get a prescription in conjunction with a letter called a letter of medical necessity from the doctor, and you don't really have to go to a specialized doctor. Your pediatrician can write it, but if your pediatrician gives you a hard time, oh, I don't think your child.
That's right.
Because some pediatricians are, lax. So your child doesn't need this, and then you go to a specialist. The specialist can write that for you with the diagnosis of it. But most of the time, your pediatrician will, if you go and say, I'm concerned my son or daughter can't climb up and down the stairs properly, or whatever your concern is, they don't tend to give you a hard time about that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was my experience.
And there is also a clinic that is free, right?
I know.
Do you
So
want to
our
talk about it?
university has a clinic. It's Kean University, and we actually are a free clinic. We have a wait list. That's why I haven't been like, come to our clinic. But
And it's
but
far.
of course,
it's far.
but yeah, and it's in Union, so it's not in this area also. But of course, if you're interested, I could definitely give you the contact. Well, I am the contact, but
I'll just go. Give you the contact.
It's me, but
Right here.
But yeah, but we put everyone on the wait list. There's no, like, you don't need a diagnosis. You just need to say, well, I would like my child to get teeth. So, and then we find out a little bit more, and then we do an assessment. And
Yeah, I was gonna say, obviously, I would think you'd start.
yeah, you start
Some kind of
first with an
assessment.
assessment.
And it is for adults too, right? Or
Oh
should-
yes, it's through our clinic is pretty unique because it's through the lifespan. So we have someone as young as 3, and then all the way through older adulthood with different goals. So. Yeah. Elizabeth, do you have comments?
Oh, and one other thing too about that, as far as eating is concerned, I agree with that philosophy with the carrots and so forth, but some children do have some kind of physical problems with
right.
eating,
Of
chewing and
course.
swallowing. And a speech therapist can also help with that as well as OT.
Developing
Sometimes they work
optimizes.
together if you
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
feeding
Very
and
good.
OT together, yeah, and I know one who's very, very good with feeding.
A speech therapist?
Yes.
With feeding? That's
Yes,
good to know.
especially with very young children.
Oh, I would love
can give you
the-
her name.
The name, because the one that I was recommended so far retired, so I
Oh.
cannot give her name anymore. So, but it's good to know.
She's pretty local too, so
Oh,
she has all
good.
kinds of interesting instruments to, prod and get the child used to, some of them look like toothbrushes and
That's great to know.
I have a specific question that I've been thinking about generalizing of skills. That term's been, I've encountered that term quite a bit. And yet, when humans learn how to do something, we learn a skill and then we're able to apply that to all kinds of other new things that we encounter. So that one skill helps us learn many other skills. And what if you have, you're working with a person who learns that one skill but somehow can't generalize it and apply it, and so that person has to learn every skill individually. Since all school is all fresh in your mind, do you have any words of wisdom about that? Is it sheer repetition or,
Well,
that's a specific problem, I know, but I'm wondering.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say repetition definitely is key, and kind of also making it a habit, because it's a new skill or a fresh skill, and maybe it's only the person might only think of it in that specific context.
Yes.
So
how do you get them to
like carry it over
and kind of
to different areas? Yeah, I mean repetition, and then just sometimes it is doing the other activities and using that skill. So setting up an activity that would require the person to use that skill.
Okay, figuring out a new challenge or something.
I see somebody nodding.
Well, I was gonna, kind of what you were just saying, you know, if there's somebody who is in OT and is having trouble generalizing that skill, you know, to their home environment, then I think maybe the OT needs to be using different different methods, different activities, bringing in, you know, something that might be an issue in the home environment, so that then the occupational therapist can practice that specific activity. You know, I think occupational therapists and physical therapists and speech therapists in general are really good at being able to do that and finding exactly what the person is having difficulty with in their natural environment, and finding a way to incorporate that into the occupational therapy, like with that specific task. So maybe.
And what about developing also the right part of the brain, more focusing on that part, because then bigger picture kind of. Yes, so then the association and everything. So with all the artistic activities and all of that, then you develop more that part of the brain, the right part of the brain, which is the opposite of being focusing on one particular skill with the left part of the brain.
Yeah. And also even more
integrating them.
And also to just to kind of, that sounds like maybe an executive functioning type issue, trouble with you know, kind of being able to, you know, figure out how A and B are connected and extrapolating from one to the other. Yes. And so, I mean, maybe talk to the OT to figure out what they recommend to maybe break down the steps in between, I wonder.
Yeah.
You know?
And with OT, we always try, ideally, we would want to do the task as close to the occupation as possible, because if you break it down into, not in the way that you're saying break it down, but breaking it down into that rote exercise, that won't have as much of a carryover effect as doing the exercise in the context of what it is that you're trying to do. And of course there could also be cognition things as well. There could, like short-term memory, long-term memory, things like that could potentially be impacting, but all of that would need to be assessed further too.
New learning takes time. It's like a lot of energy to learn new things, and carryover can take time as well. So again, like doing it in the practicing, it's a lot of repetition and practicing in the context that you're trying to carry that skill over in, and doing it like that.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else you could say about short and long-term memory for as far as children are concerned, children in the learning process?
Well, anything like particularly something about memory, or like in a context?
Well, as an adult, you know, we've been on the planet longer, but as far as their perspective about long-term and short-term memory, and if you can tell that there's a new skills, what they're.
You're wondering like how to look out for a deficit in memory at an early age.
Sorry, guys.
Oh, I just lost my
Well, I think that's
How much you
it's
use
hard
that
to
concept
it's
in
hard
your.
to say, because that's something again that, like, there are different assessments that you can do to really look at that. And it's hard to, unless you know like specifically, I think like what.
Because the memories also, it depends on the type of learning. So it could be visual memory, it could be auditory memory, it could be like kinesthetic, so like physical movement memory. So I just remember when I worked in my field work for pediatrics, there was a child who had an issue with visual memory, but not so with auditory or other senses. So we really worked on presenting different toys and then taking one away, and then have with her eyes closed and seeing, okay, which one was it? And it was kind of like that repetitive task. But because
doing training with the vision.
right, yeah, but
And how did you realize that to begin with, though?
yeah, well, so
How did that present itself? Yeah.
the occupational therapist I was shadowing or helping, she presented it as an assessment. It was her way of assessing, and it was a game. It was, okay, see how many you can remember, and then at first she didn't take any away, and then she just opened her eyes and was able to name them again. So it was like recognizing that they were animals, so recognizing the animal, closing your eyes, and then looking again, still remembering the names of the animals. And then it turned into a more further assessment of, let's take one away. She actually she took two away and realized that was too challenging, so then she just took one away. So it's just constantly checking and seeing, and then over time she was really building her visual memory.
And I think if you're aware of a weakness, you would want to work on that weakness, for example, the visual memory in occupational therapy, but then you would also want to make sure other environments, such as like a school setting, are structured so that it's optimizing the child's strengths. So that if the child has better verbal memory, that they're being, making sure they're getting enough auditory information and making sure that they're best supported for learning by getting the type of information that they can process better.
That's a really good point, pointing out the strengths that the child has as well. Because it's not just about what they can't do, but what can they do too.
There's actually a whole approach. When I was telling you that you use the Wichell lab to hear about it.
We were just
wellness.
we were just learning about a model. So we learned a lot about theories in OT, and we learned about a wellness model on Monday actually by the creator of the wellness model. So so we don't know too much yet, but the idea is the holistic person and really focusing on not just where the problem areas are, but definitely where are the strengths, and using those strengths to help that person be more independent or to increase their quality of life or their overall well-being. So with the memory, it's also the type of learning. If they learn, like I'm a visual learner, I need to see something in order to learn. I can't just hear it because it won't stick. So it's like really using those strengths, and then as we grow, then being able to tell our teachers or tell our peers, well, I really need to see it in this way because that will help me learn, or I really need to write it down, and that'll just remind me.
So focusing on the strengths, right?
Yeah.
And this model is being used currently, right, all over the country, which is great to hear.
That's for all ages.
And also too, if like, not to put in a plug here, but if you ever feel like your child has a cognitive weakness, you can have them get a neuropsychological evaluation, because that does a really good job of objectively and very comprehensively identifying strengths and weaknesses and making specific recommendations or accommodations in a school environment too. So
Tony is a
neuropsychologist.
Oh.
Not a pediatric neuropsychologist.
And Tony also has two beautiful daughters. And Elvira.
It's like that's the educated side of the world.
Well, I have to say we do those games, by the way. We do those games here for the day in the life of a college school student. We had that game. What was the name of it?
Which one?
Where's Marilyn?
I tried to play that game in mindfulness.
Exercise in the memory.
I thought of that too.
Nobody could figure. I tried to play that. Were you in mindfulness? No. I tried to play that game for mindfulness last week, and I could not there were not that many of them, I guess, in
She just looked really tall. She was sitting like up curvy.
We should explain the game. We should explain the game, right?
Yeah,
Do you remember how it was?
Yeah, so we were all sitting in a circle, and so it was so I had to go hide, so I couldn't see anyone. And then someone else picked someone to hide. So like, let's say I picked Tony to hide and covered with a sheet, and then
In the
when I
center
come
of the
back,
circle.
I come back and I have to say who's missing. So that's like a lot of visual memory. Someone had a problem with that.
And I think you were sitting right next to her, right?
Yeah.
all the time. They love it actually.
But yeah, I could not get, the kids got it every time. I could not pull them when I did it with them last week. And there are even two, newer kids there, and I pulled one of them out, and they knew exactly who it was missing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I hear every day when my daughter comes home who was outside.
Oh yeah, me too.
And I'm like, I didn't even put that together. But that's like the first thing.
Don't tell me.
It's like, oh, so-and-so wasn't there. Their name tag was on their chair. They didn't come to that. I'm like, I never thought about that. But she can't read everybody's name yet, so she just knows it by whatever cues she has.
She has auditory.
It's a good
I have a question about smart moves.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. I have a little one at that time.
Sure. Thank you for
Bye.
coming. Thank you for
Bye.
coming.
About smart moves, because group 4 like to do
Do you
it
have-
together.
Do we have your email address?
And they like to count loud.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like, how do you count or not? We can count.
Do you mean count? Wait, when they're doing what?
Like they're doing like smart moves.
Oh, when they're actually doing the moves? Oh, you do them. I didn't know you did them.
And they want to count, so they decide by themselves. So let's do 50 or 20. They count it together.
Mhm.
Is it okay? to count
Oh,
it?
sure. In fact, one of the things I talked about in Smart Moves was that kids of a certain age, really until I forget if it's age 7, don't really have that internal monologue. They tend to just say things out loud, and so they probably prefer to be counting out loud. Besides the fact that I think it sounds like they want to count as group. I don't think it diminishes the efficacy of like how effective the moves are. I wouldn't think they're still being physical, right?
I missed that.
I will tell you later.
Okay, we have time to do.
I have no questions really now.
Okay. Laura?
I don't know if I have a question as much as
About self-regulation.
about self-regulation. We were talking about that earlier, and how to help control an impulsive behavior that you don't necessarily know is coming. How Leo will sometimes remember he just darted across the parking lot that one time with us, and things like that. You don't know when it's coming, or even talking sometimes isn't the answer. Just saying something or setting the expectation doesn't work sometimes. So I don't know if that's where you balance out some exercises or try to grow certain new channels or whatever you're trying to do.
Yes, the movement exercises work really well.
Right.
But you want to speak about the zones of regulation?
Oh, the zones of regulation. Well, so when I was observing OT while I was applying and working here, I started using zones of regulation here to help with transitioning and to help with just regulating emotions. And it's a color-based system, and I've meant to bring the book, but I forgot. But so green is when you're at your optimal level, when you're ready to learn, and then yellow is like you're getting a little bit antsy or you can't really sit still. Blue is you don't have much energy, and then red is kind of like when you are not ready, you're out of control, can't sit down, you need to be moving around, or you're angry or something. So the colors kind of made it concrete because emotions are abstract, and as they're learning what emotions mean, they're also learning how to regulate their emotions. So the colors would help because the yellow, if they felt a certain way, they could associate it with yellow, and that would prevent them from getting to red. Others use maybe it's like how does your engine run, and it's a visual of a car. So is your car like ready to go, or are you going very fast, or you're not fast enough? So it's like different visuals, but I think making it very concrete helps, and it also helps to understand hopefully before something happens. So it's difficult with impulsivity, but if there are triggers that lead to something, so like many kids have a hard time coming inside from the playground, and so it makes it difficult to sit down and to have a class and to be ready to learn. So knowing that, and even the teachers even knowing that, maybe doing some exercises before you sit down, or doing some mindfulness before you sit down. And then going along with the picture schedules, I was just thinking, so sometimes words don't help, so because it's also abstract, and with different learners, just listening to something might not help. So maybe creating like a picture story of like, okay, it's the end of the day, or like a schedule, and then we have to go to the parking lot, and we walk in the parking lot, and then we walk together, and we go to the car, and it's kind of like, okay, this is me doing it, and this is what I'm gonna do. So, I don't know, there's just trying different ways, but.
We didn't try that one for
We didn't
going to the car.
We didn't do that. Maybe
But,
the car
When
line.
Leo the
Or
car,
maybe put like
I
a
love the
stop
car
sign on
line.
the tree out there. It's
Yeah.
not so visual.
That's like a
Yeah,
reminder.
Leo,
Yeah.
We walk
Oh,
there.
we do that.
Yeah.
I don't know. But with Leo, it really worked, the cards, the colors. At one
Yeah.
point, he just didn't need the cards anymore, and he made his own set actually. 2 or 3 sets he made. One for the teacher, one for his pocket.
That's right.
But at one point, he didn't need the cards anymore. We would just ask him, "And what color are you now?" And he would know. Yellow.
And it really depends on.
So then he had to calm down.
And it depends on the child, because even if the child doesn't look like they're anxious, or they don't look like they're in yellow, if they feel, if they say they're in yellow and they know what that means, then you have to go by their word. Or if they don't look like they're in red, getting out of control, they feel that way. So it's like, okay, what are your strategies, or like what's your toolbox to cope with that, and then regulate yourself so that you can come back to green.
When they're red, it's very, very difficult to bring them back to green. So you have to really catch them, or they have to. The ideal is that they catch themselves being in yellow, right?
Sometimes, oh no, I was just gonna say that sometimes also with impulsivity, not having like too many multi-step directions, like having 1-step directions, 2-step directions that are easier to follow, and not to be, this, because it's giving so much that then so 1-step direction, 2-step direction, easier to follow, can also help with impulsivity sometimes.
Yeah, no, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Less words.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We're always told.
I talk a lot.
As OTs, we're always told, just talk less. Just
Yeah.
do it.
I wish I would really do that. Just keep going. I told you, I hear it coming. I hear it. Right? It just keeps coming. It's not stopping. And I'm like, oh my God, stop talking. Stop talking. It is the coffee.
But sometimes the environment could trigger, right? The impulse,
very.
like a sound, noise actually,
Yeah.
loud noise that could just provoke that, and then you cannot really prevent that. Because if it happens outside, the noise will trigger that behavior.
But I wonder then, like, for the impulsive things, if you, if he's having the trouble that, like, he's going to be impulsive at times, maybe talking to him about, okay, what should happen when you do that, back to the kind of positive discipline thing. If you do find yourself running into the parking lot, then
What's the
should happen?
consequence?
Yeah, what's the consequence?
Oh, we had it all set up.
Oh, okay.
It worked actually. Right? It worked. He actually, well, in that case, I'm sorry, we're talking specifically about your son.
It's okay.
He had to leave the school holding hands.
That was his consequence to
With
us
an
early.
adult. Not just for us, because they will take off.
Yeah.
So he had to do it until we were able to trust him again.
Okay.
To build the
That was a
trust
good
again.
consequence,
So, and
yeah.
it took a while, right? It took a few weeks. Or a
Yes,
couple of
and then
weeks.
it's still, I was gonna,
It's still
even
a challenge,
still
but
now,
it hasn't happened.
right.
Let's touch something this year so far. Right.
I don't know, I think it has actually. But because now we're picking them up, it's easier. Because they get in the car.
It's easier.
Right? I love
Oh
the
my
car
gosh,
line.
I love car line.
The greatest thing that ever happened to the cottage school as far as
Oh, it
I'm
really is.
concerned.
We would be here for
I
like
can't, the
45
car
minutes,
lines.
and the kids just want to play.
They
And we're
would
like,
get
you're
in
not
the
allowed
car.
to play
So
here.
let's explain to the parents that one of the problems the cottage school has is that the kids don't want to leave.
They
the
don't want
school.
to go.
So we had to
We've been
set up
with these people all
after-
day. It's time to
After
go.
17 years, we had to.
I'm like
we
done
rea-
at that point.
I know. We realized we had to set up a U-turn, so then it's easier for the parents. So then we bring them to the car, and then they don't have any other option.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah, they would just go outside. They wouldn't come in. And you want to talk about get the car, get the car, get the car, get the car,
That's
get the car.
what this
Like, you know,
is,
it becomes one word, right?
Yeah.
I was always last.
Yeah, we were always first. My girls probably thought I was like the meanest. I'm like, we are not allowed to play on the church grounds. We need to leave.
You're wrong.
So now the responsibility is on the car, because the car is
Right.
coming to pick you up.
Right.
It's like the chart.
Yeah, sorry,
The car is
car's
coming.
moving.
Somebody else is behind, right?
Get it? Get it.
Actually, I think we found the solution,
It's a
right?
good one.
The car line.
For this missile board. And where did you have the
I was
question?
gonna ask, what's behind you? Like, what are those bean bags?
Oh, the
Oh. Exactly what they are.
They are beanbags.
Okay.
Well,
What is it? Just like,
Well, we brought them because
They're
I
just
don't
fun
think you
little
have
beanbags,
these
too.
actually, right?
Actually, we do
Yeah.
have.
Yeah.
Would you like to see them? But they're handmade.
No, it does.
Are they staying here?
I made them for the clinic.
Oh, okay.
We have and we use them, but they get lost, I have to say. So we have to make them again. But I do have a couple that are in the office. Whoever's in the office stays there for a little bit longer.
Yeah. They're little some of the turtles have different colors on them.
Are they weighted or squishy?
They're some
Yeah.
little. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not very weighted actually.
What are
There's-
they
Oh, I
used
see.
for?
They're squishy.
Well, so that's why we wanted to bring them because they can be used for so many things. So it was just kind of an activity if we had time. But sometimes we use them as like a gross motor thing for throwing.
Oh my God.
They're pretty.
So
They
cute.
hopefully don't break.
Look
So
at
they're
the
good to
turtles,
throw.
thank you.
And,
like this too, right?
oh, the dogs. Yeah, you have to be careful.
Oh.
Oh, treat them to somebody, I know.
But we
So
also
they
use
can make
turtles.
those actually. Sorry.
Yeah, no, and they're also squishy, so it's like a nice stress relief too, like a stress ball. So that's part of it.
And they can be
We
used like
can't
a visual discrimination of different colors or different animals. Like, you know, where's the tiger?
We do have our own. They're just homemade.
That sounds great.
So you can buy societal beans. That's what they're beanbags, right? So we can pass this around. These are the ones we use for math, actually, or for counting for. But if you need, or if you don't, you can come and learn here how to knit or crochet and make them.
I know, I think they're tricky.
We have
Right.
brushes that they get lost because we use them for math, or they end up in a basket. The kids can make them. Yes, that's right.
Oh, here we throw it, Marilyn.
Okay.
That's right. Actually, they make their own smocks. You have to see. The elementary students made. Yes.
That's amazing.
Oh, is this like one from here?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh.
These are from here. So it's just
I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah,
This
so
isn't
this
like
was
the
just
rest.
to show like with one
Oh, I don't even-
little
I never
toy, like
even
it's not
seen
just a
these.
turtle. Like you could do so much. with
They
it.
are.
And you could use it
Yeah.
for throwing, or you could use it for visual game. So it's really just like you could do that with anything, not just the beanbags. They were
Right.
just simple toys that can turn into anything. So,
I don't need to in the picture because I think
but yeah, you could
I'd
do
like
that
to
with
have it
anything.
for the school, right?
Oh yeah, we need it
So I would like to thank you very much for coming and doing this wonderful workshop. And I'd like to announce 2 more workshops that we have coming up. Next Thursday we have Poetry Appreciation with Philip Rosenbach at 6:30 p.m. I hope you can sign there if you have a pen. Thank you. And then the next one is on Monday, May 6th at 9:30 a.m. and it will be a meeting with Tom O'Leary, who is a parent at the school, and it's about understanding a special education law and how to also get the benefits if your child comes to a private school, to get the benefits from the state. So that is
The Breakfast Club.
we do.
Did anyone have comments?
Oh, thank you.
No. But
So should we say goodbye to the audience here?
Sure.
We're still live.
Thank you very
Would you like
much.
to say
We
anything
appreciate
else?
it.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.